I wasn't planning on going to my high school reunion. Honestly, I had no interest in reliving awkward memories or seeing people who barely spoke to me back then. But one of my close friends convinced me to go, saying it might be fun to catch up and see how far everyone had come. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I walked into the hall, I immediately recognized a few faces. Some people looked almost the same, while others had completely transformed. I was standing near the refreshment table when I heard a loud laugh behind me. I turned around and locked eyes with someone I never thought I'd see again, my ex-girlfriend from high school. We dated briefly during senior year. Back then, I was a quiet kid, more focused on my part-time job and saving money than on fitting in. She was popular, outgoing, and always surrounded by friends. Our relationship ended quickly, mostly because she decided I wasn't cool enough to be seen with. I still remember her exact words when she dumped me, "You're just a loser." Those words stung for a long time. So imagine my surprise when she walked up to me at the reunion, smiling like we were old friends. "Wow, you actually showed up," she said, laughing. "Didn't think you'd come." I smiled politely but didn't say much. I wasn't going to let old wounds show. She, on the other hand, seemed eager to talk. Within minutes, she started bragging about her life, her fiancé, her new house, her fancy car. I just nodded along, not giving away anything about myself. Then, almost out of nowhere, she laughed again and said, "It's so funny seeing you here. You were such a loser back in school. Remember? Always working those little jobs instead of hanging out with us." Her words didn't sting the way they used to. Instead, I just smiled. I had heard far worse in my adult life. What she didn't know was that all those part-time jobs and long hours had taught me discipline and responsibility. They set me on a path that eventually led to where I am today. As she kept talking, her fiancé walked in. I noticed him right away. He looked familiar, and then it clicked. He worked at my company. In fact, he wasn't just some employee. He was in a department that reported directly to me. I didn't say anything at first. I watched as she introduced him proudly to everyone around. When she finally brought him over to me, the look on his face was priceless. His smile faded the second he recognized me. "Wait," she said, noticing the change in his expression. "You two know each other?" Her fiancé nodded slowly. "Yeah, he's actually my boss." Her jaw dropped. She turned to look at me, eyes wide with disbelief. I just smiled politely and said, "Nice to see you outside of work." The silence that followed was almost painful. She looked from me to him and back again, clearly trying to process what she had just learned. The girl who once called me a loser was now engaged to someone who worked directly under me. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. The look on her face said it all. She quickly changed the subject, but her usual confidence was gone. Every time she glanced at me during the reunion, I could see the shock hadn't worn off. Later that evening, her fiancé came over to me when she wasn't around. He looked nervous and said, "Please don't mention any of this at work." She didn't know. I told him not to worry. What happened in high school stayed in high school. I had no interest in embarrassing anyone. My only goal was to enjoy the evening and then get back to my life. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel satisfying. For years, I carried the weight of that insult. I used it as motivation when I worked long hours, when I pushed through setbacks, when I kept building my career. And now, without even trying, life had delivered me a moment of quiet vindication. As the night went on, I spoke to other classmates, many of whom were genuinely happy to see me. A few even congratulated me on my success after learning what I do now. It felt good, not because I needed validation, but because it showed how far I'd come since those lonely high school days. Meanwhile, my ex avoided me as much as possible after that. The bubbly confidence she had when she first approached me was gone. She stayed close to her fiancé, and every time he caught my eye, he gave me a nervous smile. When the reunion finally wrapped up, I left without saying goodbye to her. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life had already closed long ago. The reunion had simply given me a chance to see just how much had changed. On the way home, I thought about how funny life can be. Back in high school, she thought status and popularity were everything. To her, I wasn't good enough because I didn't fit her image of success. Yet here we were years later, and the tables had completely turned. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. If anything, I felt grateful. Being called a loser back then had pushed me to prove myself, not to her, but to me. It made me stronger and more determined. And while she may never admit it, I could see in her eyes that night that she realized just how wrong she'd been. She didn't have to say it. I already knew. I drove home that night with a sense of peace. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. Because at the end of the day, success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. The reunion reminded me of that, and it also reminded me that sometimes the best response to being underestimated is to simply keep going. One day, the results speak for themselves. And in my case, they spoke louder than any words ever could.